Setting the accelerator pump on an Edelbrock carburetor is easy, but there's a lot of little details on how to do it, and I'll show you a few tips and a couple of tricks that I know on how to get the most out of that tuning process. So let's get started. So why do we need an accelerator pump? Well, it's designed to give you a small amount of fuel to help the engine address the load that the engine is producing and allow the engine to move through the RPM torque curves that it needs to produce power. And once into the main metering circuit, it delivers enough fuel to provide the carburetor what it needs to continue making power. But that initial shot needs a little bit of help, and that's what the accelerator pump circuit is designed to do. So some of the bog or hesitation is tuned away with the transition circuit of the carburetor, and in this case, that is the accelerator pump circuit. Now this circuit is independent from the primary or the main metering circuit, and it acts alone to cure the hesitation or bog, and that's its only job. That's all its help is there to do, is to help transition from a low load to higher loads on the engine. So here's where engine timing is super critical. Your advance and all-in timing must be set properly to help deliver that smooth transition when you're continuing to make power. So sometimes it doesn't matter how well you set that accelerator pump circuit. If your timing's not right, it's going to fight you. And that's why timing and carburation go hand in hand in the tuning process. You got to do them both at the same time. Now, the accelerator pump adjustment should be the first one that you make, and there's a couple reasons why. One, it's free. You don't have to buy anything else, and you can kind of determine the path that you need to go down. If you need to put it into a higher setting to give it a bigger shot of fuel, and it continues to maybe run a little bit better, then you know you're heading on the right path. If you put it on the bigger shot of fuel because you think you need more and it runs worse, then maybe it's a too rich condition and you need to go lean on it. So it's a really good free indication of what's going on in the engine and how you can help deliver the right steps necessary after the fact to make sure that you're continuing to tune what the engine needs and not just what you think it needs. Now, there are other options here as well, too. If you put it into the hole closest to the pivot point here and it's getting better, but you need more fuel, one of the things that you can do is you can bend this rod to help deliver it a little bit quicker. Now, this one is already set. As you can see, that as soon as we start to roll off of the cam, that it's already moving the pump. And so this one is one of those situations where bending the rod might not be necessary, but if we put this into the other hole and if it does not move as quickly as possible, then we know that we can make that adjustment with the pump or the rod and bend it a little bit to get what we want out of it. Now, the step-up springs is another nice adjustment. Even though it is outside of the accelerator pump circuit, it does help you cure a little bit of that bog by releasing the piston and moving the rod up so it gives a little bit richer fuel shot into the main metering circuit. And sometimes you need to change that spring to go from a little lighter spring to maybe a heavier spring, or to a light spring to an even lighter one, and that way you can get the shot a little bit quicker. So it's another little adjustment that you can make at the same time when you're trying to cure the hesitation and bog out of something. So even though they're two different circuits, they can be tuned simultaneously. Now let's talk about the nozzle, because that's another part of the accelerator pump circuit that you can adjust to tune to give you a bigger or lesser shot of fuel. So what the nozzle does is it's designed to change the rate at which the pump delivers the fuel to it. Now, the stock or the carburetors come with their own nozzles in it, but there's an additional kit that you can buy from Edelbrock that gives you some different sizes in it that kind of break up the nozzles and help you have some different adjustment points. So the kit comes with a 24, 33, and I believe a 43, and then the carburetors come with a 35. Here's one that's a 28. So you'll have a lot of different nozzle sizes to choose from, and the 43 being the largest nozzle size that they offer, but it's not offered in any of the carburetors. So when you change the accelerator pump and you move it to a different hole or you bend the rod, that delivers the amount of fuel that's delivered. The longer the stroke, the more fuel; the shorter the stroke, the less amount of fuel. And all that's designed to do is to help work together. So it's a combination of those parts within the circuit, and and sometimes it's a nozzle change, and sometimes it's just a simple pump change, or where the pump is at to deliver how much fuel is going to get in there. But that's another critical adjustment point within the system. Now, underneath the nozzle, there is a weight and a check ball, and what that's designed to do is the check ball stops the delivery of fuel, and the weight is there to help meter how it moves through the system. Now, the older carburetors had a spring, and thankfully they got rid of that spring. But here's a little thing that some folks try to do, and I don't recommend doing this. Sometimes they will remove the weight completely out of the system, or I've seen folks cut the weight in half to change the amount of weight that's in there, and I don't recommend doing that. If you have to go to such extremes, there's probably something else wrong with the system, or something else you can try to meter how quickly that fuel is delivered through there. So I don't recommend modifying that. If you do, I think these are available through Edelbrock. They're certainly available in the rebuild kit, so you may have to get another kit to do this, but if you have to cut that thing apart, chances are there's probably something else you could do. Now let's talk about another little trick with these pumps. Is there are two different pumps that are in there. The smaller carburetors, the 500, 600, 650s, they all come with this style of pump in it. The 800 CFM carburetor comes with one with a stiffer spring in it. So what that means is if you've got that smaller carburetor and you've got the smaller pump, where you can see it operates and you can kind of operate by hand, and this stiffer spring is very, very stiff, sometimes putting that stiffer pump within that smaller carburetor can help you get a bigger shot of fuel, because there's less resistance for this pump pushing down on there, and it will help deliver the fuel a little bit quicker. Now, it's a combination of things. Sometimes you'll need to make that combination between all of those things, changing the hole that it gets delivered into, change the squirter, maybe put the bigger one in there, but you can certainly run the bigger, larger 0.4043 squirt or nozzle, put the bigger pump in there, put it at the bigger shot, and really give yourself a really big shot of fuel. Change the step-up spring to put the little bit lighter spring in there to activate it a little bit quicker. All of those things in combination, but it is part of the tuning process. That's what you're doing there. You're trying to find the most optimal way to deliver the correct amount of fuel when it needs it at the right time. And by changing the nozzle or the squirter, by changing the pump, the spring, the location on it, that's what you're doing. You're trying to find the best shot of fuel. Now, sometimes this is best monitored with an AFR gauge, and we've heard me talk about these before, that I always recommend it. But if it's just seat of the pants tuning, then there's a lot of steps here, and every time you make a step, if you change the hole in the accelerator pump, then you're going to need to change it, go drive it. If you need to change the nozzle, then change the nozzle, and then put everything back together, go drive it. So it's a lot of little adjustments and a lot of time, and then a lot of, okay, go drive it. Yeah, it got a little bit better. Then cool, you're on the right path, and then you keep tuning. Okay, so what does this process look step by step? Well, the first thing you do is make this adjustment on the accelerator pump. Like we talked about, it's no charge, it's free, and try it in a different hole. If it's in the center hole from the factory, try it in the top hole, which will give you the longest stroke of that rod, and see if it helps out. Did it make it any better? Then yes, keep adding fuel. Did it make it worse? Then you need to find ways to remove fuel. So if you determine that it needs to add more fuel, then you can look at the step-up springs that we just talked about. And there's plenty of different choices in it. If you need to move to a lighter spring to help instigate more fuel a little bit quicker, you can do that. But remember, that's based on engine vacuum, and you need to be careful how much you do that, because if you take that away and you have high engine vacuum but put a lighter spring in it, it will cause the spring to bounce and the piston to bounce, and all that's going to do is pull that rod in and out of the jet, and you could get some erratic readings on it. So be a little careful with it, but that's kind of your next step. Now, by putting in a lighter step-up spring, as long as it didn't interfere too much with the low speed or the off idle RPM, and it didn't start causing some flooding issues on you, then yes, you can start looking at adding more fuel. But remember, within each one of these steps, you have to go out and continue to test drive. It's make one change, go do some test driving, make another change, make a decision on what you want to do, go do a lot of test driving. There is an awful lot of small change, lots of driving. If you're doing this without a dyno, it's the only way to do it. So just be prepared that this takes a long time to do, but every step you keep moving closer. So let's look at the next step. Now, by changing the step-up spring, did it get a little bit better and you need to add more fuel? The next thing you do is take a look at making a nozzle change. Now, this is the best way to start with it. If you don't have a lot of different nozzles, buying that kit, and I'll leave a link to it down below, is your best bet. I collect these. Any carburetor that I take apart that I'm not going to use again or is going to get scrapped, then I save these because they're very, very good to have around. If you don't, then I'll probably have a link to some of these and some kits if you want to purchase these from me on my website. But it's a good idea to have them around. It's another tuning point, and that's where you make it next. Now, if that worked and it got a little bit better, but you still want to keep adding fuel, then we go on to changing the pump assembly. And remember, we talked about the lighter spring to the heavier spring. If you've got the lighter spring in, put the heavier spring in and see if that combination of nozzle change and spring helped it out. Now, one thing here is when you make that change here, you may realize that you put the wrong nozzle in and it's getting a little bit too much fuel. If it did, then change to its smaller nozzle size and you're good to go. If it still needs more fuel, then back and forth, change it to another bigger nozzle size. But again, it is make the change on the pump, go drive it, confirm that that's what it's doing. If it's gotten better, then go make the nozzle change, drive it. A lot of on and off here, but small steps, but a lot of driving, and it's just confirming every step you go. Now, if you've gotten this far and you still keep adding more fuel, now is a really, really good time to break the timing light out again, readjust the idle speed, and make sure that you're bringing it down. Adding a lot of fuel sometimes will change the idle setting. You may need to go ahead and adjust the idle mixture screws again. Again, it's not one of those things I recommend doing pointlessly and constantly, but within the tuning process, it's a good time now to go ahead and verify that, get a vacuum gauge on there, and tune for that. But good opportunity right now to check the timing, verify it, add a few more degrees if you think you need it because you're adding more fuel. You need a little bit more time to burn it. So again, the timing and carburation go hand in hand. This is a primary spot to go ahead and check your timing. Now, as you're making all these changes, it should progressively get better if it's more fuel that needs to be added, but eventually you're going to get some diminishing returns and it's not making that much a difference. When you get to that point, you know you need to stop and then move on to tuning the metering circuits, the primary or main metering circuit and then the secondary metering circuit, and continue your tuning process. But at any time when you get to those main metering circuits or secondary metering circuit, you may have to come back and readjust some of the things you did. And it's always the best way to start is go right back to the pump and change the setting in it. If you're in the top hole and you're getting in the most fuel, well, then try it in the middle hole and see if reducing the amount of fuel helped out. If it did, well, then you know you're on the right path and you can continue to operate back down there. Check the step-up springs. You're in that process already. Make sure that the pump is correct, that you've got the right nozzle in it. You may have to try another smaller nozzle or continue to fine-tune it all. But again, little change, lots of driving, lots of verification. It's just a round robin. You're going to keep moving from different circuits to try to get this right. Again, once you start making 2 or 3 steps maybe, you don't want to get 4 or 5 in, but 2 or 3 steps, re-verify timing, re-verify engine vacuum, make other adjustments as needed. That's how you tune with this circuit as you move into the main metering circuit and the secondary metering circuit. So again, a lot of little steps, but it is well worth it because you are getting better every step that you go. And like I said, you may have to come back and readjust, but boy, when you are dialed in and you've done as best you can and every step or every change that you make isn't getting you any benefit, then you know you're dialed in and you're ready to go. So tuning the accelerator pump is just part of a larger overall process. And that's what it is. It's a process. It's a lot of little steps. It's a lot of little adjustments to try to get the right amount of fuel, again, at the right time, so you can get the result that you want. And I know sometimes it feels like it's very cumbersome, and that's why I think a lot of people don't do this, is it takes a lot of doggone time to do this and get it right. But the accelerator pump circuit is extremely important when you're trying to cure that little hesitation, that little bog. It's just another little spot within the whole system that you're constantly adjusting as you're making other adjustments. So whether it's changing the nozzles or changing the hole where the pump rod goes, whether it's changing the accelerator pump assembly and putting in the stiffer spring, these are all just little details in a much bigger picture. So just prepare yourself for it, that when you do this, again, it is a very, very long process. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of things that you're going to do simultaneously. And as you get into other circuits of the carburetor, the main metering circuit, the idle circuit, accelerator pump circuit, you may realize that you did something too excessive, and you may have to go back and change it again. The hole where the rod goes is a great example of that. You may decide that leaving it in the center hole is perfect, but as you go through the process and you develop maybe a little hesitation, you may have to go back there and change that again. So again, the whole thing is, it's not a half an hour process to tune these carburetors, or any carburetor for that matter. So just be prepared that it's a long series of events here to get it right. But once you get it dialed in, once you're delivering the right amount of fuel at the right time for these carburetors, they are awesome in their performance. So start with that circuit. It's always a really good indication that you're on the right path of delivering more fuel or less fuel, and it'll help you in the tuning process. So if you have any questions about the accelerator pump circuit, please let me know in the comments down below. I always will try to answer them as quick as I can and help you work through your tuning process. But I promise you, as you start working with this and you get a little bit more comfortable with what you're doing, and you feel the carburetor and the engine reacting positively to what you're doing, boy, it's going to make the driving so much more fun when this thing is dialed in correctly. So please leave your comments down below. Always appreciate the thumbs up if you thought the video was cool and you got something out of it. And we will catch you guys on the next video. We will see you.